Okay, everybody, sorry, we are running a little behind. We've had some technical difficulties. The monitor projection is not working, so we're going to work without that. It's not that big of a deal. Last time we just had one slide up the whole time. It said Ministry of Skepticism. For those of us that appreciate branding, it's cool to have the logo up there, but we've got it some other ways. You'll have to look at your books. Welcome, find a seat. And you guys coming in, make sure that you get a prayer book and a toolkit. And anyone, if you're seated and you don't have one of those yet, we can get one to you or make sure that you grab one. Because we will reference them, and like we do some prayers throughout this thing, and they're all in the prayer book, so it's nice to be able to follow along, make sure you hear and understand the words. And the Skeptics Toolkit's a nice thing that you'll be able to, I mean, both of these you can take home with you, but we'll talk more about this in the actual service. The way that this thing is set up is that for the first 30 minutes, if you get here at 10:30, like a lot of you guys did, we'll do a quick run through kind of some of the background of the Ministry of Skepticism, like what it is, why we're here, kind of what the framework, the principles are. We've kind of have eaten through all that time, so we're pretty close to just sort of starting the service. But I will give you just a brief run through of it really quick. So, and for this part, the first 30 minutes, that is actually when I show slides. We have a whole presentation that goes with it, so I can't do that now, and it's just as well since we're basically out of time. But in the prayer book, we'll use this kind of as a makeshift patch. These are the 5 beacons of the Ministry of Skepticism: self-awareness, empathy, morality, reason, agency. All of those are here in the prayer book. We have a prayer that we're going to do within the service about the beacons. The beacons are all based on empirical observations. The first 4 beacons, self-awareness, empathy, morality, reason, are based on the 4 stages of cognitive development. These are insights from neuroscience and from psychology. But so as, you know, as a child's born into the world and our brains develop, and this is a process that goes all the way through, you know, our mid 20s. A lot of our guests here, their brains are still developing. We're always learning, but your brains are still developing. Your capacity for reason is still developing into your mid-20s, perhaps even slightly beyond. But these are kind of in like chronological order. Starting with self-awareness is the first thing that happens as we're, you know, young infants. You know, when you're first born, you don't know anything. You're just crying and you need to be fed and changed and all those things. But at some point, a baby will start to become aware of its surroundings and will start to become aware of the fact that it is different from its surroundings, that it has an arm and that it can control its movement, and that its crib is different than itself. It's this concept, a very rudimentary proto kind of self-awareness. And of course, this beacon right here will continue to develop throughout the years. But then after self-awareness, and I should also mention, I'm kind of speeding through this just because we only have a couple of minutes for it. But all these things, because this is a religious framework, we're taking these things as a jumping off point, a place to start talking about things to emphasize, things that we can use to kind of offer guidance in our lives and help to structure and build lives around. So when we come together, we can kind of be contemplative and think about existential things like meaning and existence and purpose. And these things just kind of create a framework within to talk about those things. But they're not sanctified. These are not divine revelations. And honestly, they're even open to review and revision. As we were developing this framework, you know, and talking about with Lulu and talking about with Celina, and each person in Israel, as we have these conversations, people have given feedback. Like, maybe there's also virtues that go along with these things, but they've given feedback kind of on the structure, and we've made changes, and we expect to continue to make changes as we go. In the spirit of science, it is a living and evolving thing, and it is subject to constant review and revision. Nothing is set in stone. But so in the interest of being a framework to talk about more existential or emotional things, I'm telling you the inspiration for these, how they came from insights into cognitive development, the 4 stages of cognitive development. But self-awareness is also, independent of that, something that is worth focusing on. It is a healthy attribute to be self-aware, to possess self-awareness. And that's true for all these things. Even though we take our inspiration from empirical insights, there are still things that absolutely, for humans, are worthy of our attention and consideration. Empathy, second stage of cognitive development based on the theory of mind, when children recognize that other people have thoughts that are different than their own, have ideas that are different than their own. And within the presentation, which we'll get up onto our website, and at some point we'll make it accessible for all of you, but we go into what the kind of some of the seminal studies for each one of these stages of cognitive development are. So you can kind of look into those. Again, in the interest of our inspiration here, which is science and skepticism, we provide the background. We cite our sources. Morality. And there's some, in your prayer books, with each prayer, under each section, right, we've got self-awareness. The next line says, I exist. So those are what we call the revelations. So within each beacon, there's a revelation. So empathy has its own revelation. Others exist. Morality has its own revelation. Right and wrong exist. And then from those beacons, from those revelations, there are also, each beacon has two virtues. And they're all there in the prayer book. And one day we'll go into more detail on them. But that's just a brief fly through of kind of the background here. Oh, and if you're wondering why we're doing it, why a religion, because that is what everybody wonders. We talked a lot about that last time. We're going to talk a little bit about it this time. It's just a constant question. Because we have an important message. And for a lot of us, I think the reason we're here, the reason that people are kind of open to this, or at least curious, is that when you leave organized religion, and leaving organized religion, by the way, is not a prerequisite to being here. I don't think that this is incompatible with that, whatever your personal beliefs are. But for those of us who perhaps have taken a more naturalistic worldview and find some of the beliefs or the teachings of, from the more mainstream organized religion, we find them wanting, leaving a lot to be desired or unsatisfactory. There's still a lot that we miss about the community and fellowship of organized religions. We miss the opportunity to get together with like-minded friends and neighbors. And we also miss the fact that we don't have rituals and ceremonies that kind of like speak to us. I don't know what it's like for all of you, but there have been plenty of occasions where I've gone to a funeral or wedding and so much of the time is spent listening to and having to think about things that I just don't hold much value for someone who doesn't believe in those stories. So we wanted to come up with a thing that didn't require belief in any supernatural story, any particular narrative. It is universal and accessible to anyone, and it is not incompatible with our observations. It's not incompatible with the empirical evidence, which is a virtue that separates it from a lot of the conventional religions. We'll talk more about that as we get into the service. So I'm going to kind of now transition into the more structured service. Yeah. Does anybody have any questions? Don't any questions about any of that? I know I just ran through it, but now is a great time. You have a couple of minutes. I'm killing time here. What, Josie? What was your question? Mm-hmm. You said it was Noah Joe? Mm-hmm. So thank you all who are here. If anyone came in kind of as we were starting, Joby, did you get your prayer books? Okay, good. No Emmett? No Emmett? Dang it. Teenagers. Minds are still developing. He needs his sleep. Teenagers need their sleep. So maybe I'm going to run through the virtues real quick. I tried to do it so fast, I just decided to skip them, but I'm going to take a couple minutes just to say them. Oh, and y'all can't see it, but I do actually have the slideshow. Any idea that's important, and this is an important idea, because you don't start a religion, or I don't know how much value there is in a religion or an alternative to religions if all that it's offering is that it's not the other religions. In order to be something of value, you have to have something that you're offering. We wouldn't be doing this unless we thought there was an important message here, or that we were offering something of value. critical thinking and skepticism, and I know we refer a lot to skepticism here. One of the things that we're going to do in today's service is talk a lot about skepticism, because I want to make sure that it's clear or help us to kind of understand what it is, and hopefully set us and guide us on our journey through skepticism as we acquire the skills of critical thinking. But this has always been a useful and important skill, the skills of critical thinking, skepticism. I think that now it's as urgent as ever, if not more urgent than ever. We are seeing the consequences of kind of turning our backs on science and critical thinking and kind of enlightened or reasoned approach to knowledge. This is not a political organization, but it is fair from a scientific perspective to acknowledge and recognize that the head of Health and Human Services is an avowed conspiracy theorist, right? He rejects or denies the science for vaccines, for instance. That is not a political statement. That is just an observation of fact. It is true also, whatever you think about Donald Trump, it is true also that he is a conspiracy theorist. He has demonstrated that time and again. So our concern here is not about any particular policy or any particular political leaning, but we do care about the facts. And so it happens that enough of us, over half of the population here in this country at least, voted those people into office, essentially. We reject and turn our backs on critical thinking and evidence-based policy at our own peril. If we roll back the vaccine protections for our children, that will have consequences for all of us. And that is just one example of many of the dangers that we face when we reject evidence-based policy. So the solution then is not just to be activists, right? That there is a place for that. There are many scientific organizations, groups. Some of us went out to a pro-science rally. What was it called? It was like Stop, whatever it was. And that's cool. And there are skeptical organizations that advocate for more educational curriculum, more critical thinking curriculum in schools, and that's cool. But all of those things are pretty slow moving and honestly I don't think have a whole lot of impact. I know that groups like the Center for Inquiry, they have had activist organizations. They've done activism in this regard, and it's really a hard task trying to convince a school board to adopt pro-science policies, especially about critical thinking. Even harder for state legislatures or state school boards. And so a point that we made in the last service, but I think is worth repeating, is that for ideas that are important, things that are urgent, the values that are important to all of us, you don't wait for someone else to teach it to your kids. You don't wait for other people to share those values or to spread those values. You do it for yourselves. And you can use other organized religions as an example. Christians don't wait for the schools to teach their kids what's important to them, to teach their values, to teach them the stories and the narratives that are important to them. They do it in Sunday schools. They do it on Sundays in services. They do it at the dinner table when they say prayers, or at their services when they come together. And same for Jews, same for Muslims. Religions are great at passing along stories and values to the next generations. And welcome. Hi, you guys. Make sure that they get a couple of books and coffee and donuts. So why should we have to wait? Why do we have to wait for a school board to teach our kids what's important to us? And so that's what we're doing here. Instead of relenting, sort of giving up that ground to the other religions just because they are organized and just because they have the virtue of some divine decree, we are taking the initiative to build a framework around the values that are important to us. This is the best way to spread ideas to your children and through communities and beyond. And again, we'll talk more about that as we get into it, but as we get into the service, but I wanted to give kind of that background. Any questions now? Was it? I always wonder how much I'm just rambling, but great. Wait, hold on. I only want questions from my mother because I know that they will always be positive and glowing. So, Mom, anything else? How do I look? Okay, thank you. All right, Ian, go ahead. Debbie Downer.
Should we be skeptical of this?
Yeah.
Should we be skeptical of labels like the Christians as we are of labels like the left?
What do you mean?
I mean, you kind of all Christians.
Yes, great point. Yes, there's no question. And it's why I was careful to say that, you know, abandoning organized religion is not a prerequisite to being here. And of course, within Christians, there are many different strains, and there are versions of Christianity and Judaism and probably Islam. They're all probably pretty close to this, right? That don't necessarily require belief in a deity to get the lessons. So yeah, that is absolutely fair. And it's one of the virtues of skepticism from our beacons. But within empathy, I am charitable. Is that right? But we give charity to other people, right? We don't assume the worst in the intentions of others. We assume the best. Because most people usually are motivated by things that we could relate to, like, you know, they're trying to do the right thing. They want to do good. They believe that there's virtue in their actions. So yes, 100%. Thank you for clarifying that. And in most things that we do, I hope that we will keep that spirit, right? This is not, the purpose of this is not to denigrate anyone else. I think for me personally, I'm not compelled by any evidence, you know, to believe in any deities. I don't find any good reason to believe in a God or gods. That doesn't mean that there aren't good reasons to believe in God or to believe in gods. For many people, they find good reason to do it. And I think that that is beautiful. So our purpose is not here to denigrate that or anyone's personal beliefs or convictions, but it is to give us the tools to navigate information and claims meaningfully, responsibly, and rigorously. And then you take those tools and apply them however you want. There is a scientific skeptical movement, right, that started, you know, 70 years ago, whatever. But Carl Sagan, Paul Kurtz, James Randi, you know, there are some titans of skepticism, scientific skepticism. But one of them was a gentleman named Martin Gardner, and he was raised Catholic. He, as I said, was a seminal figure in the skeptical movement. But he maintained to his dying day a personal belief in God. It was something that he learned from a very early age, and even as he moved to skepticism and an evidence-based view of the world, there was still always something that was meaningful to him about his relationship with God. And so no one else in his circle ever criticized him for it. We are allowed to choose what we want to believe and what's meaningful for us personally. But any claims that we want to be accepted or validated or that we want to show evidence for, then yes, there is an expectation that you have to present the evidence for your claims and that it will have to stand up to scrutiny. But those can be different things. Hopefully that's clear. Okay, now I'm going to move into the service a little bit. Just so you know, since we did that all kind of weird, we were kind of killing time there because I was going to let you guys just sort of hang out and walk around for 15 minutes, but we just sat down, so there's no reason to do that again. You will get another break in a little bit, so don't worry. If you need... no, you can go. But yeah, there is another break, if you can hold it. Huh? Maybe, yeah, 20 to 30 minutes. I can stretch it if you want to go potty. All right, so thanks. Thank you all for being here. This is our second service, our second sanctuary. The theme of the last service was meaning. And it was from our fifth beacon, agency. As I alluded to kind of in the intro, each of these beacons has revelations, For agency, it is that life is meaningful, which is where we took the inspiration for the last sanctuary, and it has a couple of virtues. I only point that out because that kind of, as I mentioned, these are designed to give us a framework to talk about these things. So for this one, we also use a beacon as a starting point, a jumping off point for the conversation. Today's beacon is self-awareness, or I should say our theme comes from the beacon of self-awareness. And one of the virtues within self-awareness is fallibility. And I would contend one of the most important virtues that we can learn from skepticism. And we're going to talk a lot today about how we can apply that in our lives. We got a lot of great feedback from the last service, not just from my mother, thank you, but definitely also from my mother. I see a lot of returning faces, which is cool. I guess that's kind of the greatest feedback you can get. That is a testament to, what you guys thought of the last service. Or it's evidence that you're my parents and you're obligated to be here. So thank you guys for coming back. But it's appreciated. Having said that, I also want to make sure that it's clear that we welcome critical feedback. We want it. Again, we mentioned in the opening that this is a living thing. It is open to constant review and revision. So we want to hear about the things that you thought maybe were not successful or where there was room for improvement. Or even if you have questions about things. It's all open and transparent. We want to talk about it. We welcome your feedback. And I recognize that we don't all communicate equally effectively in the same ways. If you don't feel comfortable coming up and talking about these things, you can message us through our Instagram account. We have a dedicated Instagram account. If you have our numbers, any of our numbers, just reach out. As some of you have, and we're happy to have those conversations. Two of the comments that I heard the most after the last service were, one, why religion? Not surprisingly. We've talked a lot about that in the last service. We've talked already a lot about it this morning. It's a question that we anticipated hearing a lot. It's why it was kind of built into the first service. First question my mother asked. So we will talk a little bit more about that. And the other question was, what is skepticism? Which is a really obvious but fair and important question, because so much of this is hinged on the concept of skepticism. And so I want to make sure that we adequately address that so that we can all get kind of the full scope and meaning of this endeavor. So starting with why religion, kind of implied in that question is a dissatisfaction with religion, right? We talked a little bit about the reasons why we may have become disillusioned with organized religion, whether it's the belief systems or the faith-based approach to knowledge, or some of the teachings, or maybe we find that some religions, not all, but some religions can be intolerant. It can feel like sometimes organized religions are, instead of leading moral progress, are kind of having to be dragged along. And even in the most unfortunate cases, they can appear to be playing kind of the role of the antagonist against moral progress. And truth claims, this faith-based approach to knowledge can feel at odds with our own observations and with the insights that we get from science and our empirical observations. And so all these things can eventually lead to us becoming disillusioned with organized religion. I should acknowledge that there are many non-theistic religions. I mean, there's nothing special about this in that respect. Buddhism, Hinduism, and to be clear, although they may have deities, they're not belief systems, or they are not religious frameworks that are dependent upon belief in a deity or the worship of a deity. They're structured around like duty and teachings, and the belief in the deities is not kind of central to it. It's not even essential to it, which is different than the Abrahamic religions, Christianity, Judaism, Islam, for instance, where the worship of a a deity, of a God, is central to the ideology. So if we do find ourselves disillusioned with organized religion, which some of us, maybe many of us, have, then there's a lot that you lose when you leave the church or the synagogue or the mosque. You lose that sense of community, and you lose that sense of fellowship. We long for the opportunity to come together, to commemorate life's special moments. The ability to codify and share our values. And so when people ask, why a religion? I ask, what's a better alternative? I had this discussion with my father. I've had it kind of in different forms with several people, honestly. But, you know, he said something like, well, why can't we just get together? Why can't you just get together with the people that you like and enjoy each other's company? Which is beautiful. I mean, why not? Absolutely, we should be doing that. We should encourage that. But it's kind of hard to build a movement around that. It's not really very structured. When you start to think through it, it's like, what does that look like? Instead of, you know, having a religion and icons and beacons and all this stuff, just once a month I call everyone I know and that I like and say, hey, want to hang out? And we all get together and hang out. From that perspective, it's just sort of hard. It doesn't quite get to what we're trying to do here. But what if you did everything that we're doing, the icons, the beacons, the speaking, all this stuff, you just didn't call it a religion? Maybe it's just the word that's a little poison. We all come with our own baggage about religions, for those of us that have that baggage. So why not something else? Great question. Luke and I, where's Luke? Luke and I talked about this a little bit. Oh, okay. Here he is, not to call him out. But so, like a seminar, right? It's kind of like a seminar. We're getting together, we're sharing ideas. But again, what does that look like in practice? Does it feel like it rises to the same level of importance if instead of inviting you all to come to a religious ceremony, if I said, hey, I'm having a seminar, I'd like you to come to our seminar? Just sounds right? It sounds a little icky. That face is exactly right. It's like, okay, yeah. And that's true for every, guys, like I said, we are open to suggestion. If you guys are aware of a better option, we could call this lessons. We could call this a school. We could call this a philosophical meetup. But none of those things quite capture the full weight and the ambition and the scope of what we're trying to do here, the things that speak to meaning and purpose, to try to address the questions of uncertainty, feelings of insignificance, of our own mortality. Religion is a thing that speaks to all of that. We understand what it means when we talk about a religion. When we invite you to come out, hey, we're having a religious ceremony, you understand that we'll kind of be talking about those kinds of things. So in that way, I just can't think of a better way to describe it or to label it. So then what our burden is, what our challenge is not to come up with another description that's better than religion. Religion already works, it's right. It's to change our relationship to the label, to sort of free it of the baggage that we are bringing into it, because there's a lot of good that religion does. There's a lot of good that religion has to offer. So we are trying to restore our faith in religion and our recognition of what it can offer all of us. So Dad, that's why I didn't just call you and say, hey, let's hang out this Sunday. And not to put anyone on the spot, because they are all fair questions. And it's exactly the process that we're all go through as we go down this journey. I left the church. I left the synagogue. I have that baggage. I felt uncomfortable about calling it a religion, but I just couldn't think of a better option. And so we're kind of embracing it, leaning into it, and we're making it our own. Make religion great again. Is that political? You like that? Okay. No, I meant not to say that.
Arlo.
Yes. Hi, Joby.
Support of your angle on religion is the lack of ritual.
Yes,
Right?
exactly. Yes. Thank you.
We talked a little bit about Joseph Campbell, right? Who studied all this and thought, we have a great void in that.
Exactly. Right. So that's another thing that we lose when we leave organized religion. We lose the ritual and the ceremony and the things that kind of elevate the way that we approach meaning and connection and community. So exactly, and religion describes that perfectly.
Do you think we can call it a cult? Because all religions, they have a particular
Right, but so it is a matter of semantics, right? A cult is just sort of a pejorative way of describing a religion, or it's describing an early religion that hasn't achieved widespread acceptance or adoption. Substantively, there's not much difference between cults and religions, other than the aspect of manipulation, deceit, predatory behavior. Right? Those things could be. That is one way of looking at a cult. And Ian, I'm. I have all this in here. The problem is, if I address it, I'm sort of screwing up my own notes. But whatever, we can go ahead and do it. But you're right, and I guess I'll just say yes. Put a pin in that. We're going to come back to it. I'm going to get there. All that will be addressed, and it's very astute observation. So thank you for pointing it out. What's going to get us there, the kind of bridge to those conversations, is what is skepticism, right? How this is different than a cult, for instance. And so I want to talk about that a little bit. Broadly speaking, skepticism is an approach to knowledge that emphasizes evidence-based reasoning and critical thinking. It prioritizes empirical evidence and reproducibility over intuition and personal beliefs. It's a system for optimizing human brains through the identification of our cognitive biases and logical fallacies. And those biases and fallacies typically happen outside of our awareness. So it's only through the identification of them that we can hope to address them. Skepticism is not common sense. I hear this a lot. When talking about skepticism, people say, oh, yeah, I agree. We just need more common sense in the world. But this is kind of the exact opposite of common sense. In fact, we say it in the definition when we say we prioritize empirical evidence over intuition and personal beliefs. Our common sense misleads us quite often because of the biases and fallacies that we are all subject to. So it requires more rigor than just depending on your gut feeling or your common sense. This is not just common sense. Morning, did you get the books? What? No? Got them, okay. And you don't have to share. If anyone gave it away, I just want to make sure you've all got one, because you'll want to be able to read some of this stuff as we get into it. And welcome, Morning, by the way. I'm glad you could make it. Nice to see you. So skepticism is not the same thing as common sense. It's also not denialism. Another thing that is commonly said when you talk about skepticism, or if you introduce yourself as a skeptic, they say, oh, like you don't believe the moon landing ever happened. That's not the same thing. We don't deny that vaccines are safe and effective. We don't deny that the Earth is spherical. And we don't deny that we landed on the moon. We don't say that any of those things are true by fiat, but we follow the evidence. Our positions, we arrive at our positions from following the best reading of the best available evidence. If there is good evidence that the Earth is not a sphere, then we're open to it. It had just better be pretty good evidence. You know, there's a crisis in our country, in the world probably, I made a case for kind of the urgency of something like this now with conspiracy theorists that, in the highest corridors of power. But among all of us, among the populace, there is a crisis of a rejection of expertise. We don't trust experts or professionals. Kind of our American individualism is has run amok and now has made us too independent. So when we say we don't deny that vaccines are safe and effective, I'm not a vaccine expert. I can't tell you that I've done the research, but I trust the consensus of experts that devote their lives to understanding these things. And I'm open to the idea that they may not be safe or effective, but I'd like to see the evidence for it. The evidence for that, if that is your claim, it's got to be pretty good. And if the entire scientific consensus across the globe says one thing, Carl Sagan says extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. And the more extraordinary the claim, if you're making a claim that aspires to upset the entire global understanding of a thing, then your evidence has got to be really good. It can't be one rogue scientist showing some, esoteric numbers. So I want to be clear. We are open to the possibility. We should remain open to the possibility that our knowledge about things can change. The facts can change according to new and better evidence. But the evidence matters. More than anything else, the evidence matters. But insofar as none of us are going to be able to be experts in every single thing that we will ever encounter, every claim that we ever hope to understand, it's good practice to defer to the experts. Don't do it blindly. We should hold them to account, and we should hold them to a high standard. And when in doubt, we can do our own research, but going back and cite sources. Go back to the original sources. But the experts usually do a pretty good job. And so when thousands of engineers and scientists work on the Apollo 11 mission to the moon, it's really rich for you or I to come and say, I don't think they actually did it. It's all a hoax. The researchers who spent years, learning how much a rocket can weigh, how much the gas you can put, all the things you have to do. Every single piece, the screws and the nuts, every single thing. These guys spend a lot of work on all of that. And to say, well, yeah, they were just pretending. It was all charade. We're not deniers. And it does a disservice to skeptics to refer to people who deny the evidence as skeptics. There is no such thing as a vaccine skeptic. There is a vaccine denier. They deny the evidence. Another reason there can't be a vaccine skeptic is because we don't tie ourselves to positions. You can be a skeptic, and you can approach the claims about vaccines skeptically as a skeptic, but whatever conclusion you arrive at, it will be because you followed the evidence, and you're not tied to that position. It can change. You're not a vaccine skeptic. You are just a skeptic. And if you deny the evidence, then you're a vaccine denier. So I'm doing it again. I'm talking a lot about skepticisms, and I've told you that we would give you the tools. We would help to make it clear what exactly that means when we talk about skepticism. And I feel like in our conversations, there's a way to kind of like triangulate to it. You can kind of like figure out, you can kind of glean the meaning, but I want to make sure that it is clear. And so one of the things that we've done to help you do that, I've made sure that we all have both of our books, but one of the books is The Skeptic's Toolkit. Carl Sagan, astronomer, science communicator, great advocate for skepticism. This is a book that he wrote, The Demon Haunted World, kind of one of the most influential books in terms of scientific approach to existence, but also makes a great case for skepticism. And within this book, in the 12th chapter, he has a chapter called The Fine Art of Baloney Detection. And within that, he has a baloney detection kit, which we've renamed Skeptic's Toolkit because we're trying to feel like that kind of elevates the tone of it a little bit. Baloney detection, listen, I am not one to second guess Carl Sagan here. But the tools in this toolkit are useful. And it's a great starting point for anyone trying to become familiar with skepticism and what it is. The toolkit is divided into 3 sections, and we will do a quick, brief overview. We're not going to read the entire toolkit here. This is something for you guys to take home. I'll give you a quick introduction to it and encourage you to engage with it on your own time. And by all means, in the back of the toolkit is a reference to the book that this all comes from, Carl Sagan's book, the book that I just shared with you here. So if you, and the entire book is available for free online. It's an easy Google search to find it. The archive.org is one place where you can get the entire book for free. But you can also buy the book or get audiobooks, whatever you want. It's a good book. It's a good read. Published in 1995. So it is a little dated in some respects. I think we'll recognize that when we do our quick overview. But the ideas are timeless. I shared some kind of definitions of what skepticism is. I'm going to read from here the intro of Carl Sagan's, of our skeptical toolkit, something that Carl Sagan wrote. And there's a picture, a wonderful portrait of Carl Sagan here on the inside front cover. But what skeptical thinking boils down to is the means to construct and to understand a reasoned argument, and especially important, to recognize a fallacious or fraudulent argument. The question is not whether we like the conclusion that emerges out of a train of reasoning, but whether the conclusion follows from the premise or starting point, and whether that premise is true. Exactly what we said. We don't care about the conclusion so much as we care about the process. So the first section, as we look through here, is labeled Skeptical Tools, and this is a brief introduction to some of the best practices that skeptics employ when approaching claims. I'll just read one as an example, but so at the bottom of paragraph 4, at the bottom of page 4 on the left there, it says, try not to get overly attached to a hypothesis just because it's yours. It's only a way station in the pursuit of knowledge. Ask yourself why you like the idea. Compare it fairly with the alternatives. See if you can find reasons for rejecting it. And if you don't, others will. We should always be seeking to disprove our own claims. That is one of the recurring themes that we will be coming back to today. As we mentioned, today's theme is fallibility. The next section is experimental design. And because experimentation is so critical in our approach to knowledge, because it's not enough just to think about things or to argue things. You have to actually get in there and get the data. In the first paragraph on page 6, Sagan kind of makes a case that we talked about earlier, sort of an argument against common sense. But he says the reliance on carefully designed and controlled experiments is key. We will not learn much from mere contemplation. It's tempting to rest content with the first candidate explanation we can think of. One is much better than none, but what happens if we can invent several? How do we decide among them? We don't. We let experiment do it. Francis Bacon provided the classic reason. Francis Bacon wrote, "Argumentation cannot suffice for the discovery of new work, since the subtlety of nature is greater many times than the subtlety of argument. So we experiment." And finally, the introduction to common fallacies, that's on page 8. In the intro here, Carl Sagan writes, because he says it better than I could, but in addition to teaching us what to do when evaluating a claim to knowledge, any good skeptic's toolkit must also teach us what not to do. It helps us recognize the most common and perilous fallacies of logic and rhetoric. Many good examples can be found in religion and politics because their practitioners are so often obliged to justify two contradictory positions. So then he has a list of some common fallacies here, just by way of introduction. I'm going to read just one of them. at the bottom of page 8 is the argument from authority. He says, as an example, President Richard Nixon, again, this thing was written 40 years ago, 50 years ago. President Richard Nixon should be re-elected because he has a secret plan to end the war in Southeast Asia. But because it was a secret, there's no way for the electorate to evaluate it on its merits. The argument amounted to trusting him because he was president. A mistake, as it turned out. But the point is that we should not defer to authority alone. That is not a good enough measure on its own to accept a claim. And Ian, this kind of will get to your point. I am sitting up here as an authority figure, right? I'm projecting a sense of authority. It applies to me. It applies to Carl Sagan, no matter how much I try to talk him up. Every idea has to stand or fall on its own merits, independent of the voice or the presenter. That applies to all of us, any leader in this church or any institution. The claims have to stand on their own merit, ultimately. Since Carl Sagan invoked Richard Nixon there, I will also just make another note. A lot of the references in there are kind of dated, so you'll have to forgive us that. But the ideas are still powerful and timeless. Okay, finally, Ian, I guess that brings us all the way to your point. Because I hope that you guys will take these home, look at them. They're short and easy to look at. If you want to learn more, you can look at Carl Sagan's entire book, The Demon Haunted World. And there are updated versions of this since then. Other science communicators have kind of done updated versions of this, and they are all very good. But as a starting point, this is pretty good. And Carl Sagan just has a really nice prose, a nice way of writing about science that elevates it, much like we're trying to do here. But if this is a cult, Ian, it's the only one. What's that? What did he say? When this is a cult?
Yeah, success.
Oh, yeah, when it's a cult. No, I'm saying if it already is a cult, if we've already achieved our goal of being a cult, yay us, then it's the only cult where the further you go in its teachings, the more inoculated you'll be against kind of predatory deceit and manipulation that we talked about. So it is a self-defeating cult in that respect. Which is why I still contend that religion is a better name. Because religions don't have to be predatory. In fact, at their best, of course, they're not. But speaking of cults, this is a religious ceremony. So, and out of all due respect to my father, this is not just hanging out. There will actually be some ritual, Joby. There'll be some ceremony. Those of you guys that were here last time, you're kind of familiar with it. But for those of you that weren't, we're going to do some ceremony stuff. We're going to do some rituals. There's going to be some call and response. We're going to say, let it be so at the end of prayers. And for anyone that feels uncomfortable with religious ceremonies or organized religion, it may not be for you. It might feel weird, which is okay. There's nothing expected of anyone. That we encourage and invite everyone to be here and to enjoy it in whatever way is comfortable and meaningful for you. But if you do want to participate, of course, we welcome that as well. You know, those kinds of things, the reason we do them is they create a sense of bond. They bond us to our community. They create a sense of fellowship, and they create a sense of transcendence. So we've introduced ritual and ceremony. I would say we're pretty close to the break. You guys think you'll make it? We're pretty close to break. Hang in there. Micah, he says screw the break. He is self-possessed, a man of agency and autonomy. But yeah, we are to the ritual now, so we're going to do it. Let me see if this works. So I think I need Celina. Just a quick second. Where's the first song? Oh, because we didn't do the break. I see. Okay. You're right. Thank you. Oh, they did go to the break. Okay. Are they taking a break? Yeah, take a break. this is a democracy.
I'm waiting for him to come up here.
No.
Oh, I'm not? Oh, okay, sorry. Okay. We light the candle to remind us of the light of reason, the source of meaning and wonder in the world. And just as we light the candle, let us remember how the light was ignited in each one of us as we were born curious and craving affection. We close the candle in the lantern to remind us that the light must be protected. Just as the flame can be fanned through the virtues of compassion and skepticism, so too can it be extinguished through fear and ignorance and neglect. Yeah, perfect. Let each of us embody the light through the rigorous study and application of skeptical values. Let us spread the light through our shining example and through education and outreach. And let us protect the light by standing up for science and reason wherever darkness gathers. Be the light, spread the light, protect the light. Be the light, spread the light, protect the light. Let it be so. Thank you. Yeah, we didn't really practice that part. Oops.
It's all kind of like a work in progress, right? So the big experiment, thank you guys for all being part of this. And thank you for bearing with us and forgiving our woes. But I thought that was so lovely. You have to do it now. Great. Last month we had our first service. This month we rebranded it Sanctuary. This is a sanctuary service. We call this a sanctuary because there's a lot of it's fitting and poetic and kind of on brand with that designation. So with some words about what sanctuary means, what it means for us to be here. Danny, Lloyd is going to come up and say the prayer over our sanctuary.
This is a space of sanctuary. All are welcome. There are no ideas that are forbidden, no questions that are off limits. Beliefs are personal. Each of us is free to determine how we describe value and meaning. In this space, claims are neither accepted or rejected by your creed. We do not offer a fixed set of laws. There is no canon and there are no commandments. We offer patience and fellowship and the tools to guide you in your own restoration. Skepticism is a process, not a position. Leave it to know what is private and personal in own business. But for anything that can be measured or quantified, or that we hope to have validated or affirmed, so long as you are willing to follow the evidence in good faith, wherever it may be, then you are welcome in this space. You will find sanctuary here. Let it be so.
Oh,
I know.
it includes all of the, it includes each of the beacons, it includes all of the revelations that follow from each beacon, and it includes all the virtues, but it's put into kind of a prayer form. And this is going to be our first call and response prayer. So we're going to have Emily come up. She's going to guide us through this. But if you'll turn in your prayer books to the beacons prayer on page 4, you'll see that it is broken up into bold and to standard or non-bold. So Emily's going to guide us. She will read the bold parts, and then we will read the others, and we'll do kind of a call and response. Emily, let's go ahead and get you mic'd up here. Got
it. All right. Self-awareness is the greatest miracle in the universe. I am how the universe thinks about itself. Empathy connects me to other sentient beings just like me.
Others exist.
I am not alone.
All are deserving of compassion and charity.
Morality lays the foundation for well-being and coexistence.
Right and wrong exists.
I prefer well-being over suffering.
All are entitled to justice, righteousness, and honesty without bias.
Reason elevates my ability to engage with and understand the world.
Truth exists.
Nature is revealed through an evidence-based process of observation and testing.
I'm thoughtful with my questions and rigorous with my answers.
Agency empowers my existence.
Existence is meaningful.
I evolve to have wants and desires. I am motivated by love, curiosity, and creativity.
My dispassionate pursuit of truth makes my existence both rational and fulfilling. Let it be so.
I don't really know how to do this.
So that was our first call and response, and it felt very religion-y. And you know, if you're like me, some of us might have misgivings about things like that feel too, like groupthink, things like that, or maybe mindless obedience to a ritual. But I hope also that you can appreciate when again, this goes back to our idea of elevating the construct of religion, elevating the enterprise of religion to match our standards and our values, so that even when we engage like something like that, if the words are meaningful to us, if they hold value, if they're consistent with our values, then we enjoy participating in that kind of fellowship, and that kind of ritual. And we're not blazing any new ground here. We are changing the ritual to match our values, but this is already what's true of religion. When you sit in a religious service, when you sit in a church or a synagogue or a mosque and you say these things, you do get that experience. You do value the experience because you do believe in those things. So we're just trying to create that same experience for us based on our values. So thank you for participating in that experiment, in that ritual. But from my perspective, I thought that went well. We're going to keep the Lloyd train going, because the next prayer is going to be presented by Celina. And it's, we have so much to be grateful for here. We're all sharing each other's company. We're coming together and bonding around shared values. Celina, we'll get her mic'd up and she will lead us or present to us the gratitude prayer. Where do you want to put that?
We have so much to be grateful for. The very fact that we are here, that any of us should exist, despite the extraordinary odds against it, is truly a miracle. And the fact that we are here in this space together, sharing this experience of communion and fellowship, is a gift worth cherishing. So let us take a moment to be thoughtful and reflect upon this blessing. to enjoy the fellowship of friends and family and neighbors as we come together to celebrate the light of reason, the virtues of skepticism, and the miracle of existence. Let it be so.
Thank you, Celina. That was lovely. So this is, so this is the slight change in the procession, the order of events here, because in the spirit of gratitude and counting our blessings, this would be a time where we would encourage you all to stand up, take a moment, talk to your neighbors. If you see someone here that you haven't seen in a long time, you can catch up with them. If you see someone here whom you've never met before, introduce yourself. It's a time to celebrate fellowship and communion. But since you guys, we've done a lot of that already this morning and we're running a little behind, you can turn to your neighbor and shake their hand if you want, or say hi, but we're not going to get up. We're not going to break this thing down. There you go. Howdy. Okay, don't get carried away, you guys. Y'all have had plenty of time to talk. Okay, great. Nice to see you all. But so then our next prayer, because even as we, as we recount our blessings, and we have so much to be grateful for, it is important also that we are mindful of our good fortune. Not everyone is so lucky. In fact, even us, all of us at different times in our lives, we won't always feel as fortunate or as blessed perhaps as we do right now. We will all go through times that are trying or difficult, or go through times of adversity. So I think that it's important also to acknowledge that there's another side to the coin. And so our next prayer will help us think about that. It's our compassion prayer, and Israel is going to come up to share the compassion prayer with us. And can I get, no, here it is.
All good? Okay. Okay. Even as we recount the things that we have to be grateful for, and there are many, let us also observe how much of our fate is determined by circumstances outside of our control. There is not one among us who deserves credit for choosing their genes or their parents, or where or when they were born. And neither is there one among us who deserves blame for their burdens or their afflictions or their shortcomings. It is a fact of nature that our fate is neither a reward nor a punishment. No one deserves praise or blame for their being. Let us view the world honestly and see each other truly, and recognize that all are deserving of compassion and grace. Let it be so.
So they're prayers. They're structured like prayers. We say, let it be so. We offer our affirmation. But the words are based on kind of a naturalist, evidence-based outlook. We don't need faith-based claims or a deity in order to connect with these passages. And to be clear, it doesn't mean that there's not room for a faith-based deity if that is something that is meaningful for you. It's just not required in order to connect with these words for those of us that don't have a deity that we worship. So I guess it's appropriate then that for our the portion of the service now that we are moving into after we've gotten through that procession of prayers, is we have a couple of personal speaking pieces, beginning with an incandescence. In church, this might be a testimony, right? A personal testimony. We call it incandescence, staying with our theme of light. The light of reason and knowledge, which inspires the service. But so our first incandescence presentation, or I guess our only one today, will come from Celina. And she's going to talk a little bit about her movement from a faith-based way of approaching knowledge to a skeptical one, and what that's looked like in her own life. So Celina, let's go ahead and bring you up. We'll get you mic'd up.
So I'm just going to read through. It's a lot easier for me to read than try to shoot from the hip. Recently, one dark night on an Alaskan cruise, I witnessed a spectacular sight. 2 star-like lights drifted across the sky with a glowing orb following closely behind. For a moment, I wanted to believe I was seeing a UFO. But before I tell you about that night, let me back up and share some of my background before I was exposed to skepticism. Before I begin, I want to preface my story by clarifying that that is exactly what I am sharing, my story. It is not a judgment of others. I share in hopes that some might see value in seeing another perspective. Many of you already know, and some may not, that I spent many years as a Christian. Daniel and I have been together almost 30 years, the first 10 of which we spent as believers. During that time, I was comforted by a system that claimed to have all the answers. There was no need to question, no need to look elsewhere. With that came community, a sense of purpose to share and save others, and a sense that anything that was unknown could be left to trusting in God's wisdom. I found faith comforting, especially when Daniel and I suffered the devastating loss of a stillborn child who was full term. The belief that I would be reunited with our baby boy in heaven one day was consoling at the time. It dulled the sting of the grief we felt. I intentionally had blind faith, and at the time felt proud to have the kind of faith that believed even against scientific evidence that clearly contradicted my beliefs. Looking back now, that is such a shockingly scary realization. But when my husband, who's here today, began asking questions our faith couldn't answer, that was the beginning of my journey from faith to skepticism. Truth is, I was and am stubborn. Thankfully, Daniel was patient and never pushy. As he learned, he shared with me. He sought answers regardless of what the answers made him feel about his beliefs. He was actually practicing skepticism way before we even were aware of it. I mentioned before that I'm stubborn, more accurately described at the time as obstinate, and therefore, I'm embarrassed to say that it took me a bit to let go of seeing that kind of blind faith as a good thing. Seeing obstinance in the face of evidence as being a good believer, believing when others wouldn't as some sort of bragging right. But after many conversations with him, I began to take less comfort in the answers that required faith and slowly began to find comfort in uncertainty. Even harder was accepting that science, working with current evidence, sometimes needs to be corrected, and that this is a good thing. That's the scientific method in action. I've told people many times that for me, my shift of seeing change as a good thing was me letting go of the last vestiges of faith I had. But abandoning those beliefs also meant abandoning my community, the only part I ever missed. Again, this is just my story. I want to reiterate that this is not to tell others how to live. I believe it is okay for others to have faith and even believe in God or whatever force or higher power that they may believe in. Years later, almost 10 years ago, Arlo came into my life. Many of you know his passion for skepticism as evidenced in so many ways, not the least of these today's service. And I began hearing how he applied skepticism to not only claims, but to life in general, including relationships. I was routinely exposed to his critical thinking skills when I would ask him questions. I experienced seeing skepticism applied in real life, and I learned and grew because of it. I began to see the value in withholding my opinion or judgments until I had evidence, to see value in being wrong and admitting when I am wrong, because we are fallible, to see value in learning the many ways our brains trick us. Now, when I'm curious about something, I try to remind myself that beginning from the standpoint of I could be wrong is a good skeptical practice. It allows me to not hold too tightly to the outcome, to care more about the process. Recently, I had the opportunity to practice this. I was on an Alaskan cruise in August, and if anyone has ever been to Alaska, they will know the magnificence of seeing such natural beauty on display. It's truly marvelous and captivating. My family, my friend Jenny and her son Brody, were all on the trip with us too. One night, as we often did, we sat on Jenny's balcony, talking under the night sky. One night, we saw something peculiar. Two bright lights drifting together with a faint glowing orb behind them. What could it be? Do you see it too? I've never seen anything like it. And of course, someone said the inevitable, it must be a UFO. We all marveled as it crossed the sky until it disappeared from view. It was beautiful and felt special to witness. But all along, quietly, I was saying, there's likely an explanation. But in that moment, it felt more fun to believe we were seeing something magical. The hardest part was that, in a way, I wanted to be wrong. I wanted to let go and enjoy the comfort that belief brings. That night, as Danny and I returned to our room, of course, that was the topic of discussion, which my daughter Emily got to hear. And both of my sons, Micah and John Edward, also heard the story. By the time we were all together again the next day, I had time to do a quick search that verified that the most probable explanation was a satellite. According to ChatGPT, it sounds like we likely saw a satellite. I mean, you knew it was coming, right? It sounds like we likely saw a satellite reflecting sunlight, especially from groups like Starlink. Those often look like moving stars in the sky, sometimes in pairs or lines, traveling at the same speed across the night. When higher in the atmosphere, they can appear to have a faint glow or a cloudy halo behind them, caused by thin, high altitude clouds, or even fuel and ice release. The sighting was brought up again the next day when we were all together. At that time, I told the group that I had learned it was likely a satellite, and the conversation abruptly died. The first thing I did upon my return home was see Arlo. I was gone almost 2 weeks. Of course, I wanted to see him and tell him all about my trip and the UFO sighting. I told him how for the first time I felt like I was a Debbie Downer, or I had rained on everyone's parade by stating that it was not some cool, unexplainable sighting. I told him that I was saddened that even though we had seen something truly remarkable and beautiful, seeing science, astrophysics, and engineering in action, with the backdrop of the beautiful Alaskan mountains in the nighttime sky, it really seemed lackluster compared to the idea that we had seen a UFO. I find that Christianity and skepticism have their trade-offs. Even though it was uncomfortable not to join in and call it a UFO, the tiny bit of discomfort passed quickly. I realized that skepticism was no longer just something I was learning, but something I was practicing. I was okay admitting that I did not know what we'd seen. Most of all, I was glad that my family, my kids, saw the whole thing unfold. They got to witness me applying skepticism in real life. And I'm happy to be here where we are building a community where we are encouraged to think critically, to be compassionate and empathetic, to be the light, to spread the light, and to protect the light.
Wow, thank you for that, Celina. I mean, how wonderful. And that is exactly what this is about, right? Is putting these things into practice, how they impact our lives, and how you can build a life around these values. It transcends just the lab or academic settings. It really is about putting these values, these principles, into practice in our lives. And it changes your entire outlook, your approach to knowledge, but your approach to your relationships, your family, to your friends. It really is life-changing. So thank you for sharing that, Celina. It's a wonderful story. Okay. So the next part, following the incandescence, is what we call illumination. It would typically be a sermon, more conventionally understood as a sermon, and I'm going to give it. I'm probably going to modify it a little bit to make sure that we can stay within our time, because we have this until 1 p.m. and we're going to need some time to clean up and get out of here. So I guess I'll just start going. We'll see. I'll cut out stuff as I go. But I was getting, I guess I'm going to talk a little bit about my relationship with skepticism, give other examples of skepticism applied in real life. But I was getting a tattoo last month from Dominic, who has been my tattoo artist since I moved to Dallas, so probably about 10 years. So tattoo artists become, you know, they're like hairdressers or anyone that you spend a lot of time with frequently. They become kind of like therapists, you know, or friends. You share information. You sit there for hours and you talk. And since all of my tattoos are science-based or have skeptical themes, we often talk about those kinds of things, because I'm getting, I'm getting a Carl Sagan tattoo. So we talk about Carl Sagan. We talk about the meaning of the tattoo. In this case, I happen to be getting a bat, which actually is kind of a philosophical tattoo, reference to Nagel's paper on consciousness, what it's like to be a bat, which I'm not sure I endorse, by the way. The tattoo is not an endorsement of this paper, but that's for another story. But bats look cool, so I just need an excuse to get a bat. But so on this case, and we've in particular had a lot of conversation about free will, and that's a whole nother topic that we also won't get into here, not today anyway. But on this particular occasion, Dominic brought the topic to the table. He wanted to talk about the moon landing. And I guess he'd been watching some videos. He was on the side of it being a hoax. And you know, you think you're getting through to someone after years of talking about skepticism and like, you know, and then he shows up with this. I'm like, this really shows you why something like this is important, because just talking about it's not enough, clearly. You've really got to get into the lessons and the teachings and give people a way to learn it for themselves. And it was clear that he had watched, this is easier now than it's ever been because we've all seen documentaries, but now you can just go onto YouTube and watch whatever you want. And it's very easy to paint a compelling narrative when you are in control of the story. It's why you have to be especially skeptical with any documentary or any information piece that you ever watch, because it's very easy to make a compelling case for anything if you're in control of the narrative, 100%. I will never forget, this happened years ago. Stephen is here. He's my oldest skeptical friend. We go to a skeptic conference every year. But I watched a documentary on AIDS, and it claimed that HIV did not cause AIDS. And I was already a skeptic, but I was blown away by this documentary. I mean, the things that they showed, the stories they told, the experts that they spoke to. I'm like, wow, I can't believe that this is true and that I never heard it before. Thank God, kind of ironic, but thank goodness, I was already a skeptic. So immediately after watching the documentary, I went and I started looking up these claims, which is good skeptical practice. Anytime you encounter claims you find surprising or maybe even unbelievable. And mind you, I didn't think, my reaction wasn't, this is so unbelievable it can't be true. It was like, this is so incredible that I can't believe I haven't encountered it before. So I was looking into these claims. But if you're diligent and you're rigorous, you will discover often, as I did as I went through this, that each claim kind of fell apart under scrutiny. The claims weren't really as sound as they were made out to be in the documentary. The evidence didn't support always the claims that they were making. The experts, even the experts often were shown to be biased or motivated in some way. And there were other people who had counter opinions that contradicted the claims of the experts. And so after watching all of that, I was not convinced that HIV caused AIDS. But it just goes to show the power of, you know, a motivated and controlled narrative, and much like what I'm sure Dominic saw about the moon landing hoax. Like, I bet any of us could go on right now and watch a video and we will be convinced. It's like, how do you explain that? But if you look into it, if you take each claim and look into it, usually there's a pretty good explanation, and usually it's better than whatever is being offered within this extraordinary narrative. What those kinds of pieces depend on, what something like a documentary depends on, is an overwhelming display or show of force where you're getting so much information. It's like, man, that's all so convincing. How can you explain all that? But if you take the time and look into each claim, you'll find that it usually starts to fall apart under scrutiny. And in fact, really all you have to do, and this is a technique that I've adopted, that I recommend, because it's hard to look into every claim all the time, especially when you're watching a documentary, something that's throwing a whole bunch of them out there. But if someone says to me, you know, have you seen the FBI, CIA release these UFO videos? How do you explain it, or whatever? Any extraordinary claim that I'm confronted with, I always ask the person, I'll say, what do you think is the best piece of evidence, the best single piece of evidence for the argument that you're presenting here? I don't need to hear all of them. Just give me the one that you think is the most convincing, the most damning, and then we'll look into that. Because usually, if that one doesn't stand up to scrutiny, then you can expect, or it's reasonable to expect, that all the other ones also will start to fall apart under scrutiny. Start with the one that they think is most convincing. And by the way, one other note on this AIDS documentary, and this was probably 20 years ago when I watched this thing, but that very idea that HIV doesn't cause AIDS is an idea that is still believed and peddled by RFK Jr., the head of Health and Human Services. Again, this is a very dangerous anti-scientific idea. That idea is responsible for hundreds of thousands of preventable deaths in Africa due to anti-scientific policies based on the idea that HIV doesn't cause AIDS. So there are real implications, life and death implications for these kinds of ideas, which again is another argument for why we're here, why this is important. I saw another video just within the last week as I was preparing to give this talk, and I know it's about fallibility, and so I think the most effective way to give this presentation would be to share an example where I was wrong about something. had my mind changed about something. But I can't think of any examples of that ever happening. But so I saw this, and it's not because it never happens. It's just, I also can't think of any times that I was right about something. It's just hard to remember. But I saw this video come up. The YouTube algorithm fed me a video from this channel that I like a lot called Veritasium. One of the biggest science channels on YouTube, has 19 million subscribers. I've consumed a lot of their content, and I really like it. Great scientific content. And I saw this thumbnail, their new video just released within the last week, and it said something like, exposing the Monsanto conspiracy. Whoa, wow, okay. So a little bit of background, I mentioned my friend Steven, we go to Skeptic Conference every year. One year we made shirts, hand screen printed, that said Monsanto and wore them at the conference. And this was kind of like Steven and I every once in a while will kind of adopt these themes or these positions to test how skeptical skeptics are. You take an idea that might be unpopular in the public consciousness, but maybe hasn't made it all the way to the mainstream. And Monsanto was a good example of that, because people were having anti-Monsanto marches, anti-GMO marches. I dragged Lulu out to one of these in Southern California. We protested the protesters. I tried to make her carry signs, you know, that said, you know, whatever it said. What did it say?
Fight hunger, not progress.
Yeah, fight hunger, not progress. Thank you. She remembers. God, it made an impression because it was so traumatic. She refused to get out of the car. So her skeptical journey has not been a straight line. But so Stephen and I were kind of ahead of the curve on this, and Stephen probably brought it to my attention. But when you look into it, all the evidence for the claims, much like we talk about with any documentary or any motivated narrative, didn't really support the hysteria against Monsanto or against GMOs. There was a famous study, a Celina study on rats that were getting tumors from GMOs. Turns out it was thoroughly redacted. It was a poorly designed study. And it had been cited by a bunch of people that were critical of GMOs, but there was nothing to the study. Not repeatable, and even the mechanisms proposed from the study had no correlation with the things you would expect from GMOs. There was a case of Percy Schmeiser, someone who, I believe that's his name, allegedly GMO seeds had spread onto his field, and he was getting sued by Monsanto. And so it's like, you know, this was evidence of what an evil, heavy-handed corporation Monsanto was. Again, that was exposed. That went all the way up to maybe the Supreme Court, and it was unanimously ruled that Percy Schmeiser was actually stealing the seeds. They hadn't just blown onto his field. They'd become something like 90% of his crops. That doesn't just happen by accident. He was using them, stealing his neighbor's seeds. And so this is not to say that Monsanto is above criticism, right? All corporations, you can find fault in them. It's just the level of hysteria leveled against Monsanto specifically was out of line with the actual evidence to support it, and more a result of just a public hysteria, and also a very anti-scientific sentiment. This is a bias. We have a natural aversion to like chemicals or things that sound too sciencey. There's a distrust of scientists, like there's some evil agenda that scientists are committing, or that they could be wrong, as Celina said. Scientists are always changing their opinions, so how can they be trusted? And so I think all those kind of like just sort of innate sentiments bubble up, and they ended up being targeted toward Monsanto. It became the object of that. And GMOs also, this feels like GMOs are the perfect like scientific scary story, right? Scientists are taking genes from one species and splicing them and putting them in another. I mean, this sounds exactly like what we imagine evil scientists doing in their lab. But if you rely on the data and the evidence and the research, and not just your own biases and your own fears and prejudices, you'll find that there's no evidence to suggest that GMOs are bad or not nutritious. So there's nothing wrong with them. They're safe and a net positive for us as humans. But the big criticism now against Monsanto is not even GMOs, although I'm sure there's still that sentiment. You cannot buy anything in the grocery store that does not say, you know, no GMOs or whatever the labels are on them. Like as if this is a virtue. This is how effective these kind of emotional anti-scientific campaigns are, that they become just a taken for granted good, that something should not have GMOs in it. But Monsanto also makes glyphosate, which is the chemical in Roundup, which is an herbicide used on plants to make them dead. Yes, yes. Sorry, but the special story about GMO is because it works with their, the special story about Monsanto, it works with their GMO seeds. So they're able to genetically create seeds that are resistant to the herbicide Roundup. So you use those things in combination. You can kill all the weeds. It won't kill your crops. And this is a miraculous innovation. And in fact, in any other circumstance, this is the kind of thing that would be celebrated on the Veritasium channel. I've seen so many other stories where they talk about the development of rubber, and some scientists, 100 years ago working in a lab and just testing all these chemical combinations and eventually coming up with a kind of rubber that we can use and all the benefits that it's had for society. And the herbicide and herbicide-resistant seed story is that kind of really incredible achievement, human achievement of ingenuity. And yet here was this hit piece on Monsanto. And the reason I'm saying all this is when I saw the thumbnail, I thought for a moment, oh, exposing the Monsanto conspiracy. It's a scientific channel. Maybe they're exposing the myths of the conspiracies against Monsanto. Maybe they're taking the skeptical perspective. I was kind of hopeful in that way. But when I watched it, that wasn't the case. It was a biased piece. And I went into it with a skeptical mind. I had my own biases going into it. I've had this position on Monsanto for a while. I'm aware of my own bias, that this is something that I think is true, but I'm also, as a skeptic, open to the possibility that there's new information that I'm not aware of. And I'm open to the idea that my position can be changed. And in fact, there was something exciting about that, because I knew that this was coming up, and I thought, if I have a chance to change my position going into this thing, that is the example I was looking for, where I can demonstrate my own acknowledgement of my own fallibility, my ability to change my opinion. And so I watched it hopeful that there might be new evidence in there, or even a new perspective that just changes the way I was understanding the things that I'd already looked into. But there wasn't, unfortunately. And as a skeptic, there were telltale signs in the presentation of this thing that let me know that it wasn't a skeptical or skeptically rigorous piece. They interviewed experts on camera. The experts all, and because as I'm watching this, I'm stopping. And there were so many claims made in this video that I'm stopping every other second. And you all laughed when Celina used ChatGPT, but ChatGPT is an effective tool. When I watched the AIDS video 20 years ago, we didn't have ChatGPT. I had to look everything up manually. I'm typing in names, I'm typing in papers, I'm trying to find it all manually. ChatGPT can help you do that a lot quicker. I can ask the questions. ChatGPT is like any other authority. You don't take it, without following up or without verifying. But now the newest version of ChatGPT, it includes links and sources after every claim that it makes, so you can look into them. Or if you have a question about anything that presents, you can keep going down that thread. How do you know this? What's that come from? And so when I asked it about the people in this video, each one of them had a book written about the dangers of Monsanto and glyphosate. These are not unbiased sources. And it doesn't mean that they're not credible. That is an opinion that I'm sure is they have the reasons for coming to their conclusions, so I'm interested in what their position is. But if you're making a balanced piece, you can't only interview those people. Glyphosate, guys, this goes back to this idea of authority. My purpose here is not to convince everyone of the safety of glyphosate. I'm open to the idea that it may be dangerous. It's more about the way that we approach claims. And if there is any new evidence, I'm open to that, right? There's nothing, my identity is not hinged on glyphosate being safe. I don't care. But I defer to the experts. And the overwhelming consensus, World Health Organization, EPA, the European equivalent, the European Food Safety Authority, they all have categorized glyphosate as being safe. for humans. It wasn't until 2015, after decades of glyphosate being being in use, that another organization, the IARC, it's a research, international agency for the research of cancer, something like that, but an agency devoted specifically to the research of cancer. I only point that out because they are motivated, right? They have something that they are motivated by. And they, in 2015, released a new paper saying that glyphosate was probably carcinogenic to humans. That was out of step with all these other organizations. And IARC, by the way, is an agency within World Health Organization. So they were actually in conflict and contradiction with their parent organization, WHO, the World Health Organization. There was no new evidence that they used in this new designation. It wasn't based on any new research. All that happened was they used a shift in philosophy to assign and assess risk. Basically, they based it on, it was a risk assessment instead of a probabilistic assessment. All the other agencies recognize that in the doses that glyphosate is used, the quantities it's used, it poses no threat to humans. IARC said, well, if there's any possibility, and some studies, if you go really deep at the highest doses, there may be a link to non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, so therefore it's probably carcinogenic. And on their scale of different carcinogens, they put it in the same category as things like red meat, just to give you an idea of how carcinogenic maybe it is. But this kind of light, loose association to cancer and this new designation of probably carcinogenic is what Veritasium sort of hinged their whole piece on. That was their smoking gun. Glyphosate is carcinogenic to humans. So I said I was going to kind of cut this down a little bit. Now I've gone really deep on glyphosate. But Dominic, the reason I was saying all this is because Dominic, I think, had his own HIV/AIDS documentary moment, his own anti-Monsanto moment. He was watching a moon landing hoax video. And so I asked him, just like I asked you guys, what's the best evidence that you saw in these things? What were some of the claims? And then I went and I looked them up afterwards. And he said things like, how in the 1960s did they get rockets with enough energy to leave our atmosphere? He's like, Elon Musk and the best minds in science, Buck, are working on this now. And it's not that easy. And we're supposed to believe that 50 years ago or whatever it was, 60 years ago, that these, scientists working on brick computers and like giant keyboards, like that they got this rocket out of the atmosphere, which I'm sure is something that he heard in the video. But again, when you look it up, it's not that hard to find. The Saturn V rocket was a massive rocket, over 300 feet tall, capable of producing 7.5 million pounds of thrust. And this is all based on Newtonian physics. Nothing new, it wasn't magic. Stuff that we've known for hundreds of years. And by the way, we'd already launched multiple satellites. We'd had multiple missions to the moon. They just weren't manned. It's not like this just happened out of thin air. But again, when you take a narrative at face value and you don't question the source, when you don't look into it, when you don't follow up, if you're happy or just believing the narrative, you don't care about the claims, you care about the conclusion, then yeah, it's easy to go along with it. But if you apply skepticism, if you care about the process, if you care about the veracity and the rigor of your answers, then yes, you will scrutinize the claims. Exactly, yes. Exactly, yes, 100%. How do magnets work? Yeah, that is exactly right. And I mean, Dominic and I talked for hours, so there are many other claims. But each one, you can look them up, and they're perfectly reasonable explanations. There's a radiation belt around the planet. Nothing living can get through it. Okay, we look it up. Scientists have figured it out. you only persist in the belief, in the faith in those things if you don't look into the claims. The whole point of this, though, is that these things, these techniques that we're using, the skeptical approach, has application beyond moon landing hoaxes or Monsanto, multinational corporate conglomerations, allegedly evil corporations. We can apply them personally in our lives. And I do, and we do. That's why this is a religion, to take these things, not to just debunk your tattoo artist who believes in moon landings, or the moon landing was a hoax, but to make your lives more meaningful, more enriched, your relationships deeper, stronger. We use these techniques. I try to use these techniques. Celina and I, believe it or not, have disagreements sometimes. Not often. Lulu and I sometimes have disagreements. Not often. But we use these tools to help us navigate through these things. Fallibility is a huge one. Recognizing that we can be wrong, looking for the ways in which we can be wrong. So often when you come into a conflict, or when you find yourself in a conflict, your natural instinct is to retreat into your own position, to become defensive, to try and figure out how you're right, to try to understand why the person that you end up in conflict with doesn't understand your perspective. Why are they unwilling to recognize your hurt? Why can't they understand you? And in doing all of that, you are doing exactly what you're accusing them of. You're not spending any effort to understand their position. You're not understanding their hurt. But if you slow down and you use the tools of skepticism, if we exercise the awareness of our own fallibility, it gives us the opportunity to focus not on what they're doing or what we think that they're doing wrong, but we can focus instead on what we are doing wrong, what we could change in our own behavior. And what that happens when you're with someone that you trust and that is also applying these same tools is it creates a space for each of you to think about your own behavior and ways that you can improve it, and you recognize your partner's or your child's or your parents' perspective, and then you're able to come from a place of construction where you can work constructively together. And we've used this, and it's not easy. Usually, because our emotions are so powerful, you can't do it in the moment. But you can recognize, this is the trick and the tool of skepticism, is recognizing what our brains do and then trying to correct for it. So in the moment, if I'm angry and upset, I will say to Celina, because in that moment, I can't see past my own emotions, but I recognize the influence that they have over me. So I say, I can't do it right now. I recognize that I'm being emotional. Let's take some time. I need to sit with this. I'll get there, but we'll talk about this later. And then I use that time, not just to think about how I've been aggrieved. I use that time, and it's not easy. It's a process. It takes deliberation. But I shift my focus to, is there something I could be doing different here? Is there something that I'm not appreciating about Celina's position? How can I understand her hurt? And I usually get there. And then when we talk about it, instead of coming to her and saying, here's all things that I wish you'd done, or that I think you could have done, or what I thought you've done wrong, I tell her what I did wrong, or how I recognize her position. And generally, when you're with someone that you trust, and that you love and that you trust has your best interest at heart, one of our virtues is charitability. If you assume the best in your partner, that they have your best interest in mind, then whatever your instincts, your defensive instincts are that make you think, oh, why are they trying to hurt me? Why are they out to get me? Usually that's not the case. That's not why someone brings something to your attention. It's not usually why you end up in these misunderstandings. Usually their intentions are good. They do care about you. And if you trust that, then it's easy to give the space to kind of find your own fallibility in this situation. Trust that your partner is doing the same thing on their end. And if you don't have that trust in your partner, then there are bigger issues that are outside of the scope of this discussion. But if you do have it, then beginning with fallibility, applying fallibility personally in your engagements, I think is a useful and worthwhile tool that will help deepen and strengthen your interactions and your relationships. And so that's what we're doing here. These are the virtues that we can build and structure lives around. They have meaning and purpose far beyond just kind of the academic roots that were the inspiration for this religious framework. I'm going to read a quote from, I'm going to read a couple of quotes really quickly. One is from Daniel Dennett, who is a philosopher and a cognitive scientist. It's a quick quote, but I think that it's fun, and I think that it has a lot of resonance with what we're talking about here. One of the surprising discoveries of modern psychology is how easy it is to be ignorant of your own ignorance. I thought that's a great line. And one more quote from Sean Carroll, who says that science, Sean Carroll is a physicist and another great science communicator, and he's a professor of natural philosophy currently. But he says science is a way of getting knowledge. It's a method. It's a method that really relies on making mistakes. We propose ideas, they're usually wrong, and we test them against the data. Remember, Sagan made the case for experimentation. Scientists do this in a formal way, and it's a way that all of us can go through life. And it's how we should be teaching science from a very young age. Yes, well said from Sean Carroll. We're going to close here with one final ceremony. This is another new one that we've had for the service. Some quick notes before we close the service, because once we do the final service, then we will be done, and we'll clean up and we will get out of here. But we're going after this service. We're going to go to Turbo Coffee. We did it last time. It's on Coit in Plano. It's next to Brunch Time. It's near Coit and on Coit and Plano Parkway. Is that near President George Bush?
It's in between George Bush and Plano Parkway.
Okay. I have faith in her. I trust her in this relationship. The only reason we say that is because if you look it up on your map, there's another one that's closer to here that is the wrong one. A couple of us went to the wrong one last time. So make sure you're going to the one. Turbo Coffee. So please join us there if you got time. We kept the conversation going there. It's a great way to do that day, and we can eat there and get some food and some coffee. It was a great spot. Also, if you enjoyed the service, which I hope that you did, if you found lessons in here that were meaningful, please come back next time. The next one is October 11th, and it's going to be at 3 p.m. We will send out reminders. Huh? Oh, 3:30, really? We couldn't get to 10 a.m. It was already booked. So this is one of the things we're going to confront. But we will send that out next October 11th, next Saturday. And we hope that you'll come back. And if there's anyone that you think would find meaning or usefulness in this, we hope that you'll spread the word, bring them also. We opened the service with a ritual. We're going to close with another ritual. We started with kind of consecrating the lighting of the candle. Now let us close with another service. We'll bring up Lulu and Emily and Israel. Yep. And Israel, all you have to do is stand with your lantern. So we turn our attention once again to the lantern, an encasement of iron and glass that protects the candle burning within. The candle itself is a symbol representing the light of knowledge and reason. The light must be protected. Protect the light. Now, you may take up your lanterns and carry them out into the world. Hold them high and let their radiant light shine against the encroaching darkness of pseudoscience, superstition, and unreason. Science is a candle in the dark. The lantern is a beacon of rationality. Spread the light. Religion is a powerful tool, and we employ it earnestly in the service of our skeptical message. We acknowledge the role that narrative and ritual play in making our teachings more palatable and our lessons more transmissible. Even as our spirits are raised in transcendence, our feet remain grounded in reality. We draw a bright line between the tales that we tell ourselves and the truth. You may blow out the candles. The candle carries no meaning outside of our metaphors. The lantern is just iron and glass after all. The only source of meaning, so far as we know, is you and your self-awareness, the most extraordinary creation in all of the cosmos. You are the source of reason. You are the source of knowledge. You are how the universe thinks about itself. Feed your curiosity. Sharpen your skeptical tools. Spread the message of skepticism and critical thinking. You are the light. Be the light. Spread the light. Protect the light. And we repeat together, be the light, spread the light, protect the light. Let it be so. Thank you. Now get out of here. Go to the coffee shop. Thank you, Emily, and thanks everybody watching on the live stream.